The Journey of Marco Polo, the traveler who saw the East. Hello and welcome. Today we have a wonderful story about a famous traveler from long ago. His name was Marco Polo. He went on a very, very long trip and saw amazing things that people in his home had never seen before. His story is about adventure, new places, and courage. Before we begin our story, I have a simple question for you. Have you ever been on a long trip? It can be to another city or another country. Where did you go? Please tell me in the comments below. I would love to read about your travels. Now, let's start the story of Marco Polo. A long time ago, more than 700 years ago, there was a boy named Marco. Marco lived in a city called Venice. Venice was in Italy. It was a very special city. It was not built on land like other cities. Venice was built on the water. Instead of roads, it had canals. People used boats called gondolas to travel from one place to another. The city was always busy. There were big ships that came from faraway places. These ships brought interesting things to buy and sell. Marco loved his city. He loved to watch the big ships in the water. He often sat by the canals and looked at the boats. He watched the people who worked on them. They had stories about different countries. Marco dreamed of traveling. He wanted to see the world. He wanted to see the places the ships came from. Marco lived with his mother. He did not know his father very well. His father's name was Marco Polo. His uncle's name was Marco Polo. Marco and Marco were travelers. They were merchants. This means they bought and sold things. They traveled to faraway lands to find special things to sell in Venice. When Marco was a very small boy, his father and uncle went on a long, long journey. They went to the East. The East was a place that people in Venice knew very little about. It was a place of mystery. Marco and Marco were gone for many, many years. Marco grew up without his father. He heard stories about him, but he could not remember his face. One day, when Marco was a teenager, two men arrived in Venice. They looked different. Their clothes were strange. The sun had made their skin dark. They spoke the language of Venice, but it sounded a little different. These two men were Marco and Marco Polo. They had finally come home. Marco was so happy. He finally met his father. Marco was happy to see his son. He was a young man now. That night, Marco and Marco told Marco many stories. They told him about their long journey. They had traveled across big mountains and hot deserts. They had seen strange animals and new kinds of food. The most amazing story was about a place called Cathay. Today, we call this place China. They said Cathay was a huge country. It was ruled by a very powerful king. His name was Kublai Khan. He was the great leader of the Mongols. Kublai Khan was a very smart and strong ruler. His country was rich and very organized. Marco and Marco had met Kublai Khan. They had lived in his city for some time. The Khan was very interested in their stories about Europe. Kublai Khan had asked them to go back to Venice. He wanted them to bring back 100 wise men. He wanted these men to teach his people about Christianity and the European way of life. He also wanted them to bring back some special oil from a holy lamp in a city called Jerusalem. After a few years in Venice, Marco and Marco decided to go back to Cathay. They had to give Kublai Khan his answer. This time, they decided to take someone with them. They decided to take Marco. Marco was now 17 years old. He was strong and smart, and he had a great love for adventure. Marco could not believe it. His dream was coming true. He was going to travel to the East. He was going to see the amazing places his father and uncle talked about. He was excited, but also a little scared. The journey was very long and very dangerous. But his desire to see the world was stronger than his fear. They prepared for the trip. They packed food, water, and warm clothes. They also took many things to sell along the way. Then, one day, they said goodbye to their family and friends in Venice. The three Polos, Niccolo, Maffeo, and young Marco, got on a big ship. Their great journey to the east had begun. The first part of their journey was on the sea. The ship sailed across the big Mediterranean Sea. The water was blue and the sun was warm. After many days, they arrived in a port city. This land was very different from Venice. The air was hotter. The buildings looked different. The people wore different clothes. From there, their journey was on land. They bought camels. Camels are strong animals that can walk for a long time in the desert without much water. The Polos and their camels started to walk east. They were now on a famous road called the Silk Road. The Silk Road was not one road. It was many small roads and paths. For hundreds of years, people used these paths to travel between Europe and Asia. They carried silk, spices, and other things to buy and sell. The journey was very hard. They traveled through a country we now call Iran. It was a land of deserts and mountains. During the day, the sun was very hot. The ground was dry and sandy. There were not many trees. They had to be careful. Sometimes there were robbers who waited to steal from travelers. The Polos had to be brave and smart to stay safe. They walked for many weeks. Every day they would wake up early, eat some food, and then walk until the sun went down. At night, they made a fire to stay warm and to cook their food. The sky at night was full of stars. Marco had never seen so many stars. Everything was new and exciting for him. After the hot deserts, they came to a place with huge mountains. These were the Pamir Mountains. People called them the roof of the world because they were so high. The air was very thin and cold. It was difficult to breathe. Walking was very slow and very hard. Snow was everywhere. They had to wear very warm clothes to protect themselves from the cold. For many days they saw only mountains and snow. It was a difficult and dangerous part of their journey. Marco saw how strong his father and uncle were. He learned to be strong like them. After they crossed the high mountains, they came to another desert. This was the Gobi Desert. It was one of the biggest deserts in the world. It was a very empty place. For days and days they saw only sand and rocks. The sun made the sand very hot. At night the temperature dropped and it became very cold. Traveling through the Gobi Desert was very hard. They had to carry a lot of water for themselves and their camels. Sometimes the wind was very strong. It blew the sand everywhere. It was easy to get lost. The Polos were very careful. They followed the paths that other travelers had used before them. Marco was tired, but he never complained. He was learning so much. He saw how big the world was. His home in Venice felt very far away. The journey across the land took more than 3 years. 3 years of walking, riding camels, and facing danger. Marco was not a boy anymore. He was a young man. The journey had made him strong. He learned to speak several new languages. He learned how to survive in difficult places. Finally, one day, they saw something different. They saw green fields and big rivers. They saw farms and small villages. They had reached the edge of Cathay, the great country of Kublai Khan. The people here looked different. Their houses were different. Their food was different. Marco was amazed by everything he saw. They continued to travel for many more weeks. They passed through big cities. These cities were much bigger than Venice. They were full of people. The streets were busy. There were markets selling all kinds of wonderful things. Marco saw things he had never even imagined. Finally, they reached the summer city of the great Khan. It was called Xanadu. The city was beautiful. There was a huge palace for the Khan. It was made of stone and had a beautiful roof. Around the palace there were big gardens with trees, flowers, and rivers. A message was sent to the Khan. It said that the 2 brothers from Venice had returned, and they had brought the son of Niccolo with them. Kublai Khan was very happy to hear this. He asked them to come to his palace. Marco, his father, and his uncle went to see the Khan. The palace was huge. There were many guards and important people inside. They walked into a very big room. At the end of the room, sitting on a high chair, was Kublai Khan. He was an older man now, but he looked very powerful and wise. He had a long white beard. He wore clothes made of beautiful silk. Niccolo and Maffeo bowed low to the Khan. Marco did the same. They showed him respect. The Khan smiled. He remembered the two brothers. He welcomed them. He asked them about their journey. He asked if they had brought the 100 wise men and the holy oil. Niccolo explained that they could not bring 100 men. It was too difficult, but they had brought some letters and gifts from the leaders in Europe, and they had brought the special oil from Jerusalem. The Khan understood. Then Kublai Khan looked at Marco. He asked, "Who is this young man?" Niccolo said, "This is my son, Marco. He has come to serve you." The Khan looked at Marco for a long time. He saw that Marco was smart and strong. He saw the excitement in Marco's eyes. The Khan liked Marco. He decided to give Marco a place in his court. He wanted to see what this young man from a faraway land could do. This was the beginning of a new life for Marco Polo. He was no longer just a traveler. He was now working for one of the most powerful rulers in the world. He stayed in Cathay for 17 years. For 17 years, Marco Polo lived and worked for Kublai Khan. Kublai Khan was very smart. He knew that his country was very big. He could not be everywhere at once. He needed people he could trust. He needed people to travel around his country and tell him what was happening. He wanted to know about his people, his cities, and his lands. The Khan saw that Marco was a very good observer. Marco noticed everything, and he was a good storyteller. He could describe places and people very well. So the Khan gave Marco a very important job. He made Marco his special messenger. Marco's job was to travel all over Cathay. He had to visit different parts of the country. Then he had to come back and tell the Khan everything he had seen. Marco was perfect for this job. He loved to travel and he loved to learn. He traveled to places where no European had ever been before. He went south to big cities with rivers and canals. He went west to high mountains and different cultures. He saw the huge size and great wealth of Cathay. Marco learned the languages of the country. He learned about the culture and the way people lived. This helped him to do his job well. He could talk to the local people and understand their lives. On his journeys, Marco saw many amazing things. He saw a city that was built on water, much like his home of Venice, but it was much, much bigger. The city was called Hangzhou. Marco said it was the most beautiful city in the world. It had more than 10,000 bridges. The streets were full of shops selling beautiful silk and other amazing goods. He also saw something very new to him: paper money. In Europe, people used coins made of gold or silver, but in Cathay, the Khan had created money made from paper. People used this paper to buy and sell everything. Marco was amazed. It was a very smart idea. The paper money was light and easy to carry. Another amazing thing Marco saw was what he called black stones. These black stones were dug from the ground. People would burn them to heat their homes and cook their food. These stones burned for a very long time, much longer than wood. Today, we call this black stone coal. In Europe at that time, people only used wood for fire. Coal was a new and powerful thing for Marco to see. Marco also saw a fantastic postal system. The Khan had set up stations all along the main roads of his country. At these stations, there were fresh horses and riders ready to go at any moment. When the Khan wanted to send a message, a rider would take it and ride as fast as he could to the next station. At that station, a new rider and a fresh horse would be waiting to continue the journey. In this way, messages could travel hundreds of miles in just one day. Marco was very impressed by how organized everything was. Marco did his job very well for many years. The Khan trusted him more and more. He gave Marco important tasks. Sometimes he even made Marco a governor of a city for a short time. Marco became a rich and important man in the Khan's court. He, his father, and his uncle lived a good life in Cathay, but 17 years is a very long time. Marco was now a man in his 30s. Niccolo and Maffeo were getting old. They all started to miss their home. They missed Venice. They missed the canals, the food, and their family. They wanted to go back. One day they asked Kublai Khan for permission to leave, but the Khan said no. He had grown very fond of the Polos. He trusted them. He did not want them to go. He needed them in his court. The Polos were sad, but they had to respect the Khan's wish. They thought they might never see Venice again. But then an opportunity came. A princess from the Khan's family was going to marry a king in Persia. Persia was a country far to the west. The journey to Persia by land was very long and very dangerous. The princess needed to travel by sea. But the Mongols were not expert sailors. They were masters of the land, not the water. The Polos were from Venice. They knew all about ships and the sea. They were the perfect people to lead the sea journey. They went to the Khan and made a proposal. They would take the princess safely to Persia. From Persia, it would be a shorter journey for them to go home to Venice. The Khan was sad to let them go, but he knew this was the best and safest way for the princess to travel. He also knew that the Polos had served him well for many years. He finally agreed. He gave them permission to leave. The Khan was very generous. He gave them many rich gifts. He also gave them special golden tablets. These tablets were like special passports. They showed that the Polos were protected by the great Khan. Anyone who saw the tablets had to help them and give them food and a safe place to sleep. A great fleet of 14 ships was prepared. The princess, the Polos, and hundreds of other people got on the ships. They said goodbye to Kublai Khan. Marco knew he would probably never see the great king again. He was sad to leave this amazing country, but he was also happy to be going home. The journey home by sea was also very long and difficult. It was not as simple as they had hoped. They sailed south into the hot seas of Asia. They faced terrible storms. The wind and the waves were very strong. Some of the ships were lost. Many people on the ships became sick and died. The journey took almost 2 years. Finally, the remaining ships arrived in Persia. It was a sad journey. Out of the hundreds of people who started, only a small number survived. But the princess was safe. The Polos had done their job. They delivered the princess to her new home. From Persia, the Polos continued their journey. They traveled by land again. Finally, after a few more months of travel, they saw a familiar sight. They saw the blue water of the Mediterranean Sea. They were close to home. In the year 1295, 3 men arrived in Venice. They were dressed in old foreign clothes. Their skin was dark from the sun. They looked tired from a long journey. They went to the Polo family home, but no one knew who they were. It had been 24 years since they had left. 24 years. Everyone thought they were dead. The 3 men said, "We are the Polos. We are Niccolo, Maffeo, and Marco." Their own family did not believe them. They looked so different. They spoke their own language with a strange accent. To prove who they were, the Polos had an idea. They invited all their family to a big dinner. For the dinner, the 3 travelers wore their old dirty clothes from their journey. During the dinner, they went and changed their clothes. They came back wearing beautiful, rich clothes made of silk. Then they took their old clothes and began to cut them open with knives. Everyone watched, very surprised. Inside the old clothes, something was hidden. Beautiful jewels started to fall out. There were red rubies, green emeralds, and shiny diamonds. There were so many jewels. They had hidden their great wealth inside their old clothes to keep it safe on their long journey home. Now everyone believed them. They were the Polos, and they were very, very rich. The news spread all over Venice. People came to their house to hear their stories. Marco told them about the great Kublai Khan, about the city of Xanadu, about paper money and burning black stones. He told them about the huge country of Cathay. The people of Venice listened, but many did not believe him. The stories were too fantastic. They sounded like fairy tales. People gave Marco a nickname. They called him Il Milione, which means the million, because he always talked about the millions of things he saw. They thought he was making up his stories. A few years later, there was a war between Venice and another city called Genoa. Marco Polo fought in the war. He was captured and put in a prison in Genoa. In prison, he had a lot of time. He shared a room with another prisoner. This man's name was Rustichello da Pisa. He was a writer. Marco told all his stories to Rustichello. He told him every detail about his 24-year journey. He talked about the deserts, the mountains, the cities, and the great Khan. Rustichello was a good writer. He wrote down everything Marco said. He wrote it all in a book. The book was called The Travels of Marco Polo. When Marco was released from prison, he went back to Venice. The book was copied and read by many people across Europe. It was one of the most popular books of its time. For the first time, people in Europe had a detailed description of the life, culture, and geography of the East. Even with the book, many people still did not believe Marco's stories. They thought he was a great liar. When Marco was an old man and he was dying in his bed, a friend came to him. The friend said, "Marco, you should now tell the truth. Tell everyone that your stories were not real." But Marco looked at his friend and said, "I have not told half of what I saw." He died in Venice, the city where his journey began. For a long time, people argued about his book. Was it true, or was it a book of lies? But today, we know that Marco Polo was telling the truth. His book gave Europeans their first real look into the world of China, India, and other Eastern lands. His descriptions were very accurate. His book inspired a new age of exploration. Many other travelers and explorers, including Christopher Columbus, read Marco Polo's book. It made them want to travel and see the world for themselves. Marco Polo was more than just a merchant or a traveler. He was a bridge between two different worlds. He was a boy from Venice who had a dream to see the world. And he did. He traveled farther than most people could even imagine. He saw things that were new and amazing, and he shared his stories with everyone. His journey was long and hard, but his story has lived for hundreds of years. And that is the journey of Marco Polo, the traveler who saw the East. Thank you for listening to our story today. If you enjoyed it and want to hear more easy English stories to help you learn, please subscribe to our channel. It helps us a lot. See you next time.